Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Hannah and let's talk Les Miserables. So I kind of had a revelation today in that I am losing motivation in reading this. I haven't read a chapter in 3 days now, today being the third day. We have to leave soon to go play D&D for one last time where our friends Christy and Joel live. They are moving to Dublin. Joel's already been there for work and got them an apartment and everything, and the movers are literally going to be there like after we're done playing D&D and stuff. So yeah, real like bittersweet moments, and I wanted to do my chapter and everything before then, but I still haven't, and I just feel like it's getting harder and harder for me to pick this up, which is very bizarre because I feel like I'm in the most action-packed part of the book so far, and it's a bit frustrating, but I am going to try to do better because this is a goal I really want to reach. I'm over halfway through, so you think that would be more motivation, but I think just lately, these past few weeks, I haven't exactly been feeling the greatest mentally or physically anyway, and I don't know if it's just like a depressive episode or what, but I haven't really been leaving the house because of the heat, so that could be contributing to it too. But I definitely want to try to read this more like shortly after I wake up kind of thing, or something like that, to try and keep this going. So I just wanted to at least get the intro for this week since today is Monday up, but I probably won't be able to talk about today's chapter until tomorrow with you. Everything is gone. We finally have a day where we don't need the AC on at all. And that feels like it hasn't happened in forever, so I'm really enjoying this cooler day because after today it's just gonna go straight back into the 80s again. I think our high today is only like 76, but I think it's only 72 right now. So like the cooler air just feels so good. But I actually finally read some more Les Miserables. I read 2 chapters. My plan was more, but I'm actually now to part 4. So I decided to stop there so that way tomorrow will just be a brand new section of the book. But these last 2 chapters, the one was just talking about how Javert was set up. He pretty much, it was him and like 15 men surrounding the Bourbons tenement, and he got sick of waiting for Marius to fucking do something. And so he went in there, and all of the like underworld people knew who he was immediately, and Javert knew them all by name as well, and so they all gave up like immediately. Like the one guy even tried giving Thenardier a gun and was like, I'm too scared to shoot him, you do it kind of thing. And Thenardier points the gun at Javert, and Javert's just like, that gun isn't even gonna fire, why are you even gonna try? And he pulls the trigger, and sure enough it doesn't go off, and so they're all like, oh my god, you're a devil. And so that was kind of funny. Javert does not recognize Jean Valjean because there's only one candle lit in this room and it's super crowded, and he starts kind of like writing his report, and all of the people had been handcuffed and let out, and they untied Jean Valjean and we're going to get like his statement, but Javert looks up and is basically like, where is he? And he had escaped through the window with that window ladder, so he just completely fucked off, left no footprints, and they didn't see who he was. So he seems to have got off scot-free, which is, I had been wondering how that was going to go, so that definitely answers that question. Then the last chapter in this part is titled The Child Who Once Cried in a Tavern. So that is Gavroche, and pretty much he goes to the Bourbons tenement and tries to get in, like he's literally kicking the door, and the woman is like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, your family isn't here. And she just like lists off where they go, and this is on page 701, which, hey, I'm in the 700s now. But it says, there's no one there, stupid. Why? Where's my father? In prison at La Force. You don't say. And my mother? She's in the Saint Lazare. Well, what about my sisters? They're in the Medelinettes. The boy scratched his head, stared at Madame Bougon, and whistled. Ah well. And then he just kind of walks off singing a song. The other chapter also had said the other sister's name. Azelma, I believe it was, but I'm gonna need to double check it. Yeah, Azelma was the younger sister, and then Eponine had deserted her post and they couldn't find her. But then they tell the Thenardiers they have both of the daughters, so I'm not really sure what's going on with that, especially since this woman is also being like, neither of your sisters are there. So I don't know if everyone's just kind of assuming that both of them have been captured because Eponine hasn't popped up again, or what's going on there. I wonder if she ended up staying with Marius after or something, because it does not talk about Marius at all anymore. And so that's where part 3 of this book ends. And part 4 is called The Idyll in the Rue Plumet and the Epic of the Rue Saint-Denis. And it's just like, what? So book 1 is called A Few Pages of History, which obviously has me worried based on all the other history bits in this book. And chapter 1 is called Well Tailored. So, oh god, I see it says the years 1831 and 1832. So we'll see if this actually starts talking about someone relevant, or if we are just going to go into another big history of Paris, I suppose. I don't remember how many parts are in this book, so I would assume at least one more, but I'm actually gonna check because now I'm curious. Yes, there are 5, the last one being titled Jean Valjean, so that's cool. That's where I'm at right now, and I'm very interested to see if we keep up with more of this kind of action style type writing, or if it's now gonna slow down a bit and give us some more backstory of wherever we are headed next. So I want to do a bit of a story time before I read my Les Miserables chapter today. So I've talked a bit about how our friends Christy and Joel are moving to Dublin, Ireland. And I don't know if I mentioned before, but Monday night after D&D, their moving truck didn't get there till 9:30 in the evening, so we helped them move boxes. And then yesterday was their last official full day in Paris. So for dinner, they wanted to go to the first creperie they had ever been to here. So we met them there, and I swear it cursed us because I had made a joke to Toma, here comes Starty, before we had left, saying oh, watch them be closed, because we're very close to August when a lot of restaurants and businesses close for the whole month, because that's the huge vacation month before re-entry in September for going back to school and stuff. And yep, that's Torty. And so I jinxed it because as we're walking up to the door, I'm like, this place doesn't look open. And sure enough, there was a note on the door that they are closed for vacation, and everything is falling on me at once. So we ended up going to this diner that was a 15-minute walk away. So it was an American diner called Mama's Diner that I had seen an article about before, and so had told the group about. And so they wanted to check that out. And it was a pricey place. It was good. I had chicken burger and stuff and mac and cheese, and it was good, but never worth the prices. And I had made the comment of well, one last night of paying Paris prices. And this is when they said something that absolutely shocked me. I did not know this. Dublin is the priciest city in Europe, because they were oh, well, Dublin's more expensive than here. And I was just what? That really shocked me. I knew Paris wasn't number 1, even though a lot of people think it is, but I never would have guessed Dublin. But they were talking about how Dublin is basically the Silicon Valley of Ireland, and so that's kind of why and stuff. So that just blew my mind. But that was last night, and at 3 a.m. this morning, they had to leave to get to their 7 a.m. flight to Dublin. And they're all there, made it safe and sound and everything, but apparently they had issues with the taxi this morning. When they got to Dublin, they had to wait 2 hours for Strider, their dog, because apparently the tram that they would bring him on was broken or something, and so they had to wait for another one. They lost one of their bags of luggage, the airline did, and it was the luggage that had all the pet food and stuff. And then when they got to their apartment, half an hour later, the moving guy was there with all the stuff that we had packed up that Monday night. And so it was just everything all at once to them today. So that must have been a crazy time. And I definitely don't I'm not envious of them at all for having to go through that, because whew, Like, I moved to Paris, and like, I don't want to ever have to do a big move like that again. That's a lot. But what's cool is if we ever go to Dublin now, we have a place we can stay. Oh yeah, also I forgot to add in there, yesterday night we walked back to their house because we were going to mail something for them, and when we left, I had noticed there was an old guy on the street. Like, he was behind us, and when we were leaving, and so I just like glanced over my shoulder and noticed like, oh, there's like an old guy on the corner. I didn't like register anything beyond that. And when we got home, we had a text from Joel who was like, hey, did you see the escapee from the hospital on your way out? And I was just like, oh my god, what the fuck, are you kidding me? So apparently this old guy was in like his hospital gown and had a walker and like hospital booties on and was just like walking down the street. I guess people had gone up to him and were trying to help him and stuff, and he was just wanting to go home. And like, that was so sad. But apparently it actually took a while for the nurses to come out to try to get him in a wheelchair to go back in. And it all turned out okay in the end, but like, oh my god, I felt really guilty because I didn't register any of that. Like, my brain just said, oh, old guy. That was it. Like, didn't notice anything out of the ordinary because their apartment is right next to a hospital. But oh my god, I felt dumb and I felt very guilty, but glad I had a happy ending. So I'm gonna read my chapter or chapters now. I'm not sure, we'll see how long they are, and I will be right back. This is page 705. This remarkable period is sufficiently distinct and now sufficiently remote from us for its main outlines to be discernible. We shall seek to depict them. So this sounds like the start of another long, like, history lesson kind of thing. And also, since this book is called A Few Pages of History, that's also another clue. So this might be another Waterloo situation. We will see. But there is another passage I want to read out loud. This talks about the Bourbons, who admittedly I don't know anything about. I actually have a few questions for Toma about them, because I think I've completely like misunderstood who they were. But according to the book, they ruled from 1814 to 1830, and I guess at one point they just kind of were like, nah, we ain't ruling anymore, and just fucked off into exile. It was very odd. My phone was full, I had to transfer some things, but this is on page 707. It says, when it thought the time was ripe, the Restoration, which is what the reign of the Bourbons was called, believing itself victorious over Bonaparte and enrooted in the nation, that is to say, believing itself to be both strong and deep, abruptly showed its face and chanced its arm. On a July morning it confronted France and, raising its voice, revoked both collective and individual rights, the sovereignty of the nation and the liberty of the citizen. In other words, it denied to the nation that which made the nation, and to the citizen that which made the citizen. This was the essence of those famous acts which are called the Ordonnance de Juillet. The Restoration fell. So apparently they makey 'em stakey, and in 1830 they just completely abandoned the crown and willingly went into exile, I guess, which, I mean, that's better than being like guillotined. So that's a thing. But yeah, that's just what this chapter is about. I'm dumb and for some reason thought the Bourbons were English, so this was definitely a history lesson for me, but I mean, American education doesn't tell me much about the rest of the world. So tomorrow I will be reading chapter 2 in here, which is called Badly Stitched, so not sure where that is going to go, but I'm assuming we are having more history lessons. It is way too loud in the living room right now. I was hoping to be able to film in the living room without the AC, but that's not going to happen, so I'm just going to do it here with the light fading away. So I read my chapter yesterday, and I just finished my one today, and of course Torti is going to be here. And pretty much the one yesterday was just leading up to Louis Philippe becoming the king. And so I'm just going to read the last little paragraph here from that chapter. This is on page 712. It says, when the clever ones had finished their work, the huge weakness of their solution became apparent. It had all been done without regard to the basic rights of the people. Absolute right cried out in protest, but then, an ominous thing, it withdrew into the shadows. So pretty much this is talking about like statesmen and some political stuff. It was just a few pages of that, ending with Louis Philippe becoming the next Your Majesty kind of thing. And then we have like 10 pages of Victor Hugo going on and on in today's chapter, which is titled Louis Philippe, pretty much about how he's this amazing person, and maybe not necessarily the best king, but as a man, he's the best around. And like, Victor Hugo pretty much has a hard-on for this guy. Like, it literally just goes on and on and on. Yeah, there's almost no paragraph breaks at all. It's just bricks of these sentences. And it says, like, he was sober, steadfast, peaceable, and patient, a friendly man, and a good prince who slept only with his wife. And it's pretty much things like that, over and over and over, just all these descriptors of him. He declared himself to be an Orleans and not a Bourbon. And at the end of page 714, there were these two words I had never heard of before in my life. It says, there was the spirit of pettifogging chicanery. I was like, what the hell are these just made up words? Torty. And I looked them up, and chicanery is trickery, and pettifogging is bickering. But then I also saw that they can also mean like the same thing, so I don't know if it's just being redundant there or what. But that's what those mean. I definitely had to look that up. Like, that just sounds like nonsense, essentially. But yeah, like it says here on page 715, Louis Philippe might be classed among the great men of his century and take his place among the great rulers of history if he had cared a little more for glory and had possessed as much feeling for grandeur as he had for expendency. And so pretty much it describes him as being more of like a family man and more of like a father than a king to France. And it goes on to say on page 717, he was a king who believed in openness. During his reign, the press was free and the law courts were free, and there was freedom of conscience and of speech. So pretty much he was very, very open about his reign, like everything that happened was known to the public kind of deal. And apparently one thing he did is he would go over the files of those that were going to be put to death, and it was talking about how like his desk would just be stacked with all these files, and he would read them all, and how one day he was like, I saved 7 of them today. And it talks about how like the guillotine wasn't really a thing when he was reigning. Are you tripping at birds from the reflection on the cabinets? Okay. So he would basically pardon people and like figure out their case better and stuff like that. And there's near the end of this chapter, there is a sentence in French, and so it has the translation like in a footnote in the bottom. And the translation is, his pardon is granted, it only remains for me to secure it. But then it says, the words may have been written to Hugo himself, who had sent the king a short poem pleading for barbs. And I thought that was super interesting because that's how Hugo is kind of like injecting his own life into the story. So I think that's the first time I've seen a footnote like that. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And so that's that chapter. And so next is chapter 4, which is called Flaws in the Structure. And so since this one was all praising Louis Philippe, I'm assuming maybe this one will be everything he did wrong, just based on that title. So we will see that tomorrow, and looks like it's another kind of lengthy chapter. But that's everything for today. It is Friday, I think? Yeah. And so not much happening at all this week, as you already know. But tomorrow, there's this event happening at Hotel de Ville at like 10:30 at night, because it has to be dark. Because it's this light show that's like replicating the Aurora Borealis kind of thing, like the Northern Lights. And I don't exactly know how that's going to be set up. I just know it's outdoors in front of the Hotel de Ville at night, and it's free. So we're just going to kind of show up and see what it is about. So that'll probably be how I end this vlog tomorrow, but I will also check in beforehand with the next chapter. I hate myself. Like, I forgot to film yesterday. Just straight up forgot. Every time I would remember, I would be like, okay, I need to do this. And even a half hour before we went out last night, I was like, all right, I have half an hour. I'm just gonna film and be done with it, and everything will be all good, right? No. Instantly forgot. Instantly forgot. Remembered as we were walking out the door, and as you probably saw from the clips, pretty lackluster. Definitely not what we were expecting. And like, it was over such a small area, and we really didn't know how they were gonna do it or whatever. And since it was so windy, the like smoke they were using to reflect the light was just fucking off. With how many people were there and how packed the public transports were coming back, it was not worth it. Like, we couldn't even take line 1 to come home. We ended up having to walk to Châtelet, taking RER to Charles de Gaulle station, and then taking line 1 from there 3 stops to our stop. So a bit chaotic, and we pretty much only stayed there for 10 minutes to watch it, because I mean, there was nothing. There were times where it was so dissipated that you really could barely see any light. So yeah, not the best event, but at least it was free. So right now I started the chapter already, but I want to read some things out loud, so I think I'm just kind of gonna go as I'm reading, so that way I don't forget, because that's happened a lot where I'm like, oh, I want to like point out this sentence or whatever, but then I forget where it is in the chapter. So I will be right back to do that. I apologize for some of the backlighting. I'm trying to like block it with my body the best I can. This is on page 719, and this is how this opens up. It says, at this moment, when our tale is about to plunge into the depths of one of those tragic clouds which obscure the beginning of Louis Philippe's reign, there can be no equivocation. It is essential that this book should state its position in respect of the king. But Victor Hugo, you just wrote a whole chapter praising Louis Philippe. So what the fuck is this? So, like I said before, I think this is going to be the chapter that just kind of goes through all the fuck-ups now. So I find it kind of interesting how he separated that, I guess. But pretty much describes how Louis Philippe was pretty much just given the throne, and he's like, yeah, sure. And he thought that he was like elected and everything, when he really kind of wasn't. So then on the next page, there's a sentence that says, the blind can no more be blamed than the partisans of La Vendée can be dismissed as brigands. And that line got me because that La Vendée is the area where Puy-de-Fou is, so it talks about the history a lot there. They were the people where it was basically a whole town of like royalists. They were not in favor of the revolution, and they pretty much just got nuked, like the entire freaking town. It is quite a story. So seeing that here was just like, oh man. And then it goes on to say, the government of 1830 was in trouble from the start, born on one day and obliged on the morrow to do battle. And then skipping a few sentences, resistance was born the day after its installation, perhaps even the day before. So pretty much it's just kind of talking about how his reign was kind of doomed from the start. And then we get into talking about the July Revolution, and that's where I had stopped before. So now I'm gonna start again, and we have several more pages of this chapter. Okay, so it's talking about how this revolution has many interpretations, and I really like how it is explained here. It says each interpretation gives birth to a political party, each contradiction to a political faction, and each party believes that it has the sole authentic gospel. Each faction that it has its own light to shed. Which, I mean, in my mind, that instantly brings up religion. Like, that's how fucking religion is. And then the first sentence of the next paragraph is, power itself is often no more than a faction. And so there's just some really good sentences in this chapter so far. And honestly, I'm just kind of fascinated at the moment. And here's kind of something that shows nothing fucking changes, because this right here is a lot of what's the problems, like in America, for example. But it says, meanwhile, the internal problems piled up. Pauperism, the proletariat, wages, education, the penal system, prostitution, the condition of women, riches, poverty, production, consumption, distribution, exchange, currency, credit, the rights of capital and labor, a fearsome burden. Like, all those things are huge fucking issues even today. And reading older texts, I always find things like that interesting, fascinating, whatever you want to call it, because it just shows our problems don't change. They remain the same, and people are always going to be fighting against them. So now this is bringing England into the picture, which has quite a lot of parallels to today as well. This is on page 722. It's talking about how there's two main problems. Problem one being the production of wealth, and the second problem being its distribution. So that's what it's referring to here. It says, England has solved the first of these problems. She is highly successful in creating wealth, but she distributes it badly. This half solution brings her inevitability to the two extremes of monstrous wealth and monstrous poverty. All the amenities are enjoyed by the few, and all the privations are suffered by the many. That is to say, the common people. Privilege, favor, monopoly, feudalism, all these are produced by their labor. It is a false and dangerous state of affairs whereby the public wealth depends on private property, and the greatness of the state is rooted in the sufferings of the individual, an ill-assorted greatness composed wholly of materialism into which no moral element enters, I should say. And oh my God, that really just sounds like the corporations and the hoarding of money and how CEOs just make more and more while the people at the bottom of the ladder are making less and less. Like, it's right there. It's predicting the future. And the world will leave you to die, because the world leaves everything to die that is based solely on egotism. Everything that is in the eyes of mankind does not represent a virtue or an idea. All right, this is the last paragraph I'm going to read, I promise, but I think this is turning into one of my favorite chapters, even though this book as a whole, I was just like, what the hell is this, going into it? So, page 723, it says, solve these two problems, encourage the rich and protect the poor, abolish pauperdom, put an end to the unjust exploitation of the weak by the strong, and a bridle on the innate jealousy of the man who is on his way for the man who has arrived. Achieve a fair and brotherly relationship between work and wages. Associate compulsory free education with the bringing up of the young, and make knowledge the criterion of manhood. Develop minds while finding work for hands. Become both a powerful nation and a family of contented people. Democratize private property, not by abolishing it, but by making it universal, so that every citizen without exception is an owner, which is easier than people think. In a word, learn how to produce wealth and how to divide it, and you will have accomplished the union of material and moral greatness. You will be worthy to call yourself friends. That last little bit is the gotcha there. I thought that was hilarious. Oh my God. Freaking Victor Hugo. Definitely has French pride, that's for sure. Alright, I lied. I have to read the next sentence too. It says, this, apart from the aberrations of a few particular sects, was the message of socialism. Which, that is the word that Americans fucking fear for some reason. It blows my mind. So basically, that chapter just ended with it listing everything going wrong in France and in Europe in general. And damn, that is quite a list. So I'm gonna end there. I hate myself for yesterday. I cannot believe I forgot like that. I mean, I can, but like it's happening way too frequently. But as always, thank you for hanging out with me. Sorry for the weird ending there. But yeah, I think I'm gonna have to like note down this chapter and the pages and everything, because I definitely think that was one of my favorite chapters in this book. That was just like a really good history lesson, I'd say. But yeah, as always, thank you for hanging out with me. It is greatly appreciated. And until next time, bonne journée and au revoir.